The Memphis Grizzlies had a bit of a close call this week, ending their 2-game home-and-home series with the Spurs with a very close victory. Greg Popovich has had it out for the Grizzlies since 2011. He's not going to let Memphis get away that easy, but it was a good competitive win for Memphis as they enter a tougher part of their schedule. We'll talk about that. We'll talk our big mid-season takeaways, and we'll give you an update on All-Star voting here next on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Stick with us. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I am your co-host, Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, Damichael. And before I compliment him on his beautiful new headphones, I do want to say that Locked On Grizzlies is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out over on YouTube. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, all those fun things. Continue to help us be better here at Locked On Grizzlies and continue to make us a part of your NBA experience. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Damichael Cole, Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal. You look fantastic. I love your new headphones. Those are very sharp, very suave. And, of course, the hoodie, always rocking that. You're looking good. It's good to be back with you, sir. How are you doing?
It's great to be back with you as well, Joe. It's just great to have the tandem back together, but I'm great. I'm great. You know, there have been a lot of things going on the Grizzlies side these days between last game, the MLK, events, service events that the team does leading up into the game coming up on Monday against the Suns. Then you have an away game coming up as well. So a lot of cool things kind of going on around the Grizzlies. It's been a lot of those things. So we're staying busy. We're staying busy always, but nothing to complain about, Joe. It's a lot of good things.
A lot of good things. A lot of good vibes, much like the vibes of I believe it's an 8-game winning streak.
8-game winning
the Memphis
streak.
Grizzlies.
NBA leading longest active winning streak right now.
Ooh, so we can officially say that the Grizzlies are the hottest team in the National Basketball Association. Interesting. They had to earn it on Wednesday night, though, Damichael. It was not given to them by any stretch of the imagination against the San Antonio Spurs. And I want to start off with that because that is fascinating to me. And again, you were there in person. You saw the game. You saw the Spurs really kind of pick apart the Grizzlies defense a lot of times. And, Jaren Jackson Jr. got dunked on, which when you block as many shots as Jaren Jackson Jr. does, you're going to get dunked on. Obviously, Ja Morant stood up for his boy and made sure that his dunk on Jakob Poeltl was all the much more impressive. So lots of dunks, lots of scoring in that game on Wednesday. My biggest takeaway, aside from Greg Popovich being a really good basketball coach, is if you are going to be a team that is going to be at the top of a conference, Eastern, Western, it doesn't matter, you have to win games like that, where maybe you don't have it on one end of the floor or the other team's just playing really well, which, again, credit to San Antonio. I don't want to say the Grizzlies just stunk. Obviously, Memphis didn't stink offensively. It's possible the Spurs just played really well. So you have a team that's maybe playing over their heads a little bit compared to their overall record. You survive in advance, like Jim Valvano used to say, right? The former coach at NC State. Survive in advance. And Wednesday felt like a survive in advance game to me. Sure, maybe it could have been more impressive. Maybe they could have been more dominant. But it's not like the team is struggling in terms of their point differential on and off the court. I know we'll talk about this a little bit later in the show. But last season, the 56-win season, they were plus 6.2 in point differential per cleaning the glass. This season, guess what they are, Damichael? Plus 6.1. So it's not like it's been that much of a difference. Even with this close game against the Spurs, they're still having the same amount of relative success that they were last season, even if it's not quite as dominant as maybe we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and to your point, you got to think about it. There's a plus 73 skewed into last year's results. that kind of, make those numbers as good as they were. So you can make an argument that this team has just been more steady, right? You don't have to beat every team by 10, 20 points, but they're winning. And they're winning, by a comfortable margin on many nights. Remember how they did the Milwaukee Bucks at home? I mean, it's games like that. But right now, just going back to your point about this Spurs team, I think it's a anomaly how the Spurs play against the Grizzlies, but it is something that other teams can kind of copy and say, hey, this is a formula we can try to take a little piece of this if we want to beat Memphis. Easier said than done because of personnel, right? With the Spurs, these last couple games, it's simple. Who's the number one guy? The Grizzlies don't know. Who is the guy that you say, Dylan Brooks, sick him and shut him down? Who's that guy? We don't know. So I think from a defensive standpoint, we've talked about it on here a lot, Joe, how, when they played the Jazz, you put Dylan Brooks on Larry Markkinen and it's centered around, hey, hold him below his average. Then you put him on Zion Williamson, and then you put him on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and you put him on, Chris Paul when you played the Suns, and if Devin Booker would have played, he would have guarded him, and you put him against Steph Curry usually when you play Golden State. That's kind of how this team centers its defense. It's like, okay, Dylan Brooks is the head of the snake. Then on the back end, you got Jaren Jackson Jr. ready to cover up some things. But with this Spurs team, 33 assists in this last game against the Grizzlies.
Woo, so that's pretty good.
That's hey, if you've seen the Grizzlies record when they have that many assists, let's just put it like this: there isn't a loss on there. When they have over 30 assists, I believe the Grizzlies are like 16-1 or something like that. Like it's a number that is widely known in that locker room. They talk about, hey, we got to get 30 assists. The Spurs got to 30 assists. And the Grizzlies only had 19 and still won. So, like you said, survive in advance.
Survive in advance.
You can beat a team who has 30-plus assists, you take it. But the Spurs just stress you out because there's just not one guy who's coming into the game like, oh, yeah, we got to stop him from scoring 30 tonight. There isn't that guy. Keldon Johnson came back, and, he's a big part of the offense and whatnot. But it felt like Trey Jones, Jakob Pertl, a couple other guys, Malachi Brandon came off the bench, Josh Richardson. It felt like all those guys were almost getting even opportunity. It's harder for a team like the Grizzlies to kind of prepare and center their defense around who to stop in those situations. And the Spurs ball movement just makes it tough on you.
It's a difficult matchup for the Grizzlies. It has been for over a decade, largely because Greg Popovich hates the Grizzlies now after what happened in 2011. Even though he gave them some love, I know on Monday, he talked about this is a really good, fun team, enjoy it, those sorts of things. And I wrote about that over at Written in the Dark, my Substack, the idea that Memphis is set up to be the next great small market dynasty, assuming they play their cards right. I do take offense to you disrespecting Dougie McGrizzly, as I like to call him, Doug McDermott. He's the clear number one option in San Antonio. Come on, Michael. No, but in all seriousness, I think that your point is a fair one, and I'm intrigued by what Memphis does moving forward as they play some better teams. Because, again, the record against the Western Conference has been made a lot of. I think they're, 13 or 14-10 now against the West. They dominate the Eastern Conference, but they're about to enter a stretch of their schedule, as you know well, since you're going to be in person there for a 5-game road trip. They're about to enter a part of their schedule that's a little more challenging. So is there something that the Spurs did to Memphis that opposing teams can take advantage of?
I really don't think so. Outside of, their personnel kind of tends you to the fact, hey, we don't know which guy to really key on. So we're just going to play good, sound team defense. And the Grizzlies are capable of doing that, in stretches and things like that. But I think the defense is better when you say, hey, Dylan, go take that guy out of the game. And Dylan takes that guy out of the game. And now, a team's looking for their B option to kind of, come alive and beat the Grizzlies. And you got Jaren Jackson Jr. doing what he does. That's when I think the Grizzlies are the toughest to beat. And most of those good teams that they're going to play, guess what? They're going to have those superstar guys that Dylan is going to be waking up in the morning thinking about defending. He can't wait to guard those guys. But at the end of the day, I think this upcoming stretch, when you talk about it, right, this stretch, we really want to see how the Grizzlies performed. The last time the Grizzlies went on, a West Coast road trip, adversity hit. Mm-hmm. Adversity really hit. Right. And it's going to be, put up or shut up time again real soon.
I remember those very negative episodes that we had to do. What now? Right. I think that was one of the ones that you did. So it's nice when you're on the winning streak. So let's keep that energy going, Grizzlies. Damichael and I are going to talk about our major midseason takeaways next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Big fan of LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know what success looks like in 2023. It all depends on team members that you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people that have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job posts on your company and their $875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. They identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect them with you fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all on one platform. Hey, it's a brand new year. We're all trying to start it strong, and the right team member can help you do just that. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitor. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Major midseason takeaways next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you for joining us. I am your co-host, Joe Mullinax, joined by my wonderful co-host, Damichael Cole, the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis. And we got some midseason takeaways here, Damichael. I used to love these posts when I was the site manager over at grizzlybearblues.com. It's time to pull out the hot take cannon and talk about, what you really strikes you after watching over 40 games now of Memphis Grizzlies basketball. I believe we're over 40, right? I don't have the exact number in front of me.
We're right at 41.
There you go. So we are literally smack dab in the middle of the season. Fantastic. So I've seen enough to make a pretty strong hot take. But I'm going to let you go first because mine, it might be smoldering. It might melt the computer screen. I don't want to do that to you. I want your take to happen first. So by all means, take it away, Damichael Cole. Your number one takeaway about the Memphis Grizzlies halfway through the season.
I think the Grizzlies are positioned right now, Joe, to really have a bigger season. And I say they're positioned to do so because so far this season, what we've seen the Grizzlies go to, and in a way we saw it last season with, COVID restrictions and things like that, but everyone was going through that, right? The Grizzlies started the season, 14 games, no Jaren Jackson Jr. Congratulations. Guess what? You got Jaren Jackson Jr. back. Now Desmond Bane's going to miss 17 games. And in between that time, this guy's in the lineup. Ja Morant misses, 7 games in and out, ankle this, ankle soreness, left ankle soreness, thigh injury, and so forth. So many guys in and out the lineup to the point, at one point, the Grizzlies had the second most missed games due to injuries. I think right now they're currently 4th in the NBA among teams who've missed games due to injuries. And guess what? They're still right there, Joe. So my point here is I think they're positioned for the long haul because we're just not starting to see the starting lineup. Jaren Jackson Jr., talking to him about the starting lineup a couple of days ago, and this was one of the more interesting Jaren Jackson Jr. responses of the season. He was like, look, man, when we're in the lineup together, we just smile because we know how special and we know how good that starting lineup can be, and we know we haven't seen it much. They're smiling because, Joe, they believe they can do some really special things when that starting lineup is cooking like that. Tyus has been, 6-man, I think he should be a 6-man of the year candidate. Not winner, but candidate. A lot of things are clicking right now. A lot of things will click even more over the course of the season. Tougher competition is on the way, but I think right now this team is looking like it's taking that leap from playoff contender to championship contender.
I like that. I think that's a good take. And it's good to see Tyus Jones getting back to what he was, because you and I have talked about here on the show, more so me than you, because again, I'm the hot take cannon. Tyus kind of wasn't very good there for a long stretch of the season. And you can make excuses. Oh, well, he had to play with David Roddy. Oh, well, he had to play with Jake LaRavia. Oh, well, he just got a contract extension and he's the highest paid. I'd have to double check this. One of the highest paid backup point guards in the entire National Basketball Association. No excuses, play better when you're paid the way that Tyus Jones is paid. In fairness to him, he's done exactly that these last 10 or so games. He's looked much more like the guy that they paid that money to. The guy that showed up the last 10 or so games does look like a sixth man of the year contender. We need that guy to stick around. All right. Are you ready, Damichael?
Throw it.
Warm up. Got to stretch it out a little bit.
Fire the seat up, Joe. Fire the seat up. Fire the seat up.
Okay. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Dillon Brooks is the fourth most important member of the Memphis Grizzlies, and he needs to be signed to a long-term extension. That is my takeaway. That is my takeaway, and here's why. Okay, because I'm big on narratives. You and I have talked about that a lot.
Yep.
I'm large on the narrative of sport, and I think that Dillon Brooks, more so than any other Grizzlies player, and I'm saying what I'm saying, Dillon Brooks, more than any other Grizzlies player, is responsible for the mentality of the team and the culture of the team. Yeah. Ja Morant fits into it very well. Jaren Jackson Jr. fits into it very well. We talk about this team not having a veteran leader. It's not a traditional veteran leader, but I think they have one. It's Dillon Brooks. You see it in the videos that he does with the dances, with the guys before games. You see him in terms of his interviews after games, the way that he takes responsibility for things, the way that he handles himself. I think Dillon Brooks is the fourth most significant member of this team. And if it means long-term that you don't hold on to a Brandon Clark, if it means long-term you don't hold on to a Steven Adams, one of those guys has got to go to get under the luxury tax.
Boy,
I think you do it to keep Dillon
Brooks.
Hot,
right? He's coming in hot.
And the numbers back it up. No Grizzlies player has played more minutes this season than Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks has logged 1,159 minutes. Ja Morant is the next closest with 1,100. Okay. Dillon Brooks is a plus 11.8 in terms of point differential. 95th percentile in the entire NBA. Yep. Defensively, he's minus 9.3. The Grizzlies' defense is 9.3 points better when that man is on the floor. That is 97th percentile in the entire NBA. Oh, but he takes terrible shots, Joe. The Grizzlies are 2.5 points better offensively when Dillon Brooks is on the floor. He's one of the most impactful in terms of winning players in the NBA. I'm not saying you pay him a Jaren contract. If he wants 4 years, $100 million, I think I'm walking away from that. But 4 years, 80 to 84 million, something like that, pay the man. He's the fourth most important Grizzlies player.
Joe, you came in hot, and you were ready too. You were ready.
Hot.
I like it.
I've been thinking about it.
You were ready. And here's the thing, Joe. I think you made great points with what you just said. If someone calls you crazy for this, then I don't know what to tell them, because everything that you said is kind of what we've seen this season. So that's one of the standout things this season as well. We've talked about how he's guarded all these different guys and he stepped up to the matchups. And then again, his teammates, they call him the heart and soul of the team. This is the players' words, not mine. They call Dillon Brooks the heart and the soul of this Grizzlies team, longest tenured player. He's one of the players on the team that still has, kind of that played with Marc Gasol, played with Mike Conley. So great point that you pointed out as well. And I mean, I don't think you're wrong. I think you cannot go wrong with extending, Dillon Brooks. What does that look like? I mean, wings aren't growing on trees. It'd be a nice contract. Now, when you talked about Steven Adams and Brandon Clark, that's where the conversation really gets interesting, because Brandon Clark just got his money. Steven Adams, I would counter your argument and say that Steven Adams has been just as important as Dillon Brooks. So, there's kind of like an identity thing with both of them. And that's why I say the Grizzlies, what makes this team so good is the entire starting five stars in their roles. The thing about the NBA that's different from a lot of sports, you don't need the most talented players to win. Mm-hmm. You can't just throw the five best players at their position in a starting lineup and say they're going to win because they're the five best players. That's not how the NBA works. You have to have players who complement each other, and the Grizzlies have that. With a point guard who likes to attack the basket, is one of the best paint scorers in the NBA, you kind of need a shooter who can kind of balance that out with some spacing, and you have Desmond Bane. Well, neither of those guys, and Ja and Dez, are known as like plus defenders. Someone has to defend someone on the wing. There's Dylan Brooks to help you with that. Okay, who's going to rebound? Jaren Jackson Jr. isn't known as a great rebounder. His stats have not shown himself to be a great rebounder up to this point. Well, we'll just throw in arguably the best rebounder in the NBA to take care of that. Well, Steven Adams isn't the most mobile player. When you put him on switches, he can be attacked and things like that. Well, guess what? Go ahead and get past Steven Adams. Good luck at the rim with Jaren Jackson Jr. waiting on you. The thing is, they have a bunch of guys who play their respective roles really well, and Dylan Brooks, you highlighted him. He's one of those guys that does that as good as anyone.
You're exactly right about Steven Adams. He's been extremely important too. They've already extended Steven Adams. They need to extend Dylan Brooks next. And I said what I said about Brandon Clark. If I'm having to choose, we can talk about it on another episode, but I think I'm planting my flag exactly where I should. It's on Dylan Brooks Island, baby. Give me a condominium. Let me get some property. I'm building a house. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Bet Online. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, statistics, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football, basketball, the playoffs are obviously starting in the NFL. You've got the NBA kicking up into high gear. Baseball will be back soon. College sports. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, if you're listening to Locked On Grizzlies, chances are you do. They can even find those, or you can even find those, over at BetOnline as well. They are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Damichael, I believe today is Friday, right? Today is Friday, and that means we have a new segment here on Locked On Grizzlies. It's All-Star Votes Updates. So Damichael will be giving us the latest numbers. Surely Ja Morant has made up some ground, right? Right?
You know, I thought that too, Joe.
Oh, geez,
I thought that too.
I guess we'll just have to find out when we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stay tuned in. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your co-host, Joe Mullinax, joined by the wonderful Damichael Cole, Grizzlies beat writer over at the Commercial Appeal. And as we mentioned a moment ago, it is time for our all-star voting updates. Damichael is on the precipice of greatness with his discussion of these numbers. And I know the way that we talked about the triple votes that happen on Fridays, I believe today is another triple vote day. I know that Memphis ran out there after listening to or watching Locked On Grizzlies and voted for Ja Morant. He's in first place now, right, Damichael?
Grizz Nation, I'm sure you're doing your job.
You better be voting. I voted.
I'm not going to challenge you for doing your job, but the numbers are a little bit more lopsided, Joe, than they were even last week.
They are not.
Ja Morant was doubled last week. I think Steph Curry, Luka Doncic were at around a little bit over 2 million votes, and Ja was right under 1 million votes. In 1 week, Ja is up to about 1.4 million votes, whereas Luka Doncic is at 3.65 million votes, and Stephen Curry is at 3.9. Again, he's almost tripled, Joe.
Tripled? Double lapped? What are we talking about here? Did people not see Ja Morant dunk on Jakob Poeltl again, making him wish he was eating some Poeltl's fried chicken down there in Memphis instead of playing basketball? Did they really not see that? How is Ja Morant that far behind?
It's a tough one to figure out, and we talk about, you know, it leads me to marketability, right? Is there something that we're missing here? But you know what? I don't think so, you know, because if you look at Giannis, who I think you would say is arguably the best small ball guy. I mean, when it comes from playing in a smaller market out there right now, he's over 4.46 million votes right now. Even the Joker, right, is over 3.4. Yeah, over 3.4 million votes himself. So it's deeper. I think when you look at the Western Conference, because Zion Williamson, great player, by the way, Zion Williamson has I think, about double the votes as Ja Morant. So Ja Morant is 8th in the Western Conference, and it's a tough one because it made me think, am I missing something? Because it's not only the fact that Ja Morant is 8th, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is right on his hairs. And when I say on his hairs, Ja is close to 1.4 million. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is about at 1.33 or 1.34 million. He's right on the cusp of passing Ja Morant. Basically, what we learned from the last update to this one is Ja didn't make up ground on Luka and Steph, but Shai Gilgeous made up ground on Ja Morant.
Memphis, I got to be honest, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. We have to be better. I voted multiple times. I can honestly say that. I logged in. I even went against my better judgment because I'm a learned man, Damichael. I know you know that after all our conversations. This large head that has a receding hairline, it's not just, balding. It's filled with brains. I try to go in and have logic and reason with all of my arguments, every single one of them. Of course, if you've been following my career as a blogger and a podcaster, you know that to be a fact. When you think logic, you think Joe Mullinax. I sit down and I even couldn't even straight face out. So yeah. I sit down and I go and vote and does somebody deserve it better than Desmond Bane? Yeah, somebody deserves it more than Desmond Bane. Luka Doncic, Steph Curry, SGA, all these different guys probably deserve it more than Bane. But you know who I voted for? Desmond Bane. You know why? Because I host the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, not the Locked On Warriors podcast, not the Locked On Mavericks podcast. Shout out to Nick. Okay. I host Locked On Grizzlies with my good friend, Damichael Cole. So I voted just like that, Desmond Bane. Then I went to the front court. Jaren Jackson Jr. Hard to find. Doesn't have those leading scorer points the way that they organize it. I voted for Jaren Jackson Jr. alongside Nikola Jokic and LeBron James. Are there guys that are better than Jaren Jackson Jr. perhaps? Yeah, maybe in terms of scoring, combining every aspect of the game. But you know what? I'm not the host of the Locked On NBA podcast. I'm the host of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. I did my part. I voted for those three guys. I almost voted for Dylan Brooks to really create chaos. Okay. And people say, oh, well, that wouldn't be very fair, Joe. Why are you doing that? You got to be respectful. Kevon Looney of the Warriors got more votes. He moved up a step.
Throw logic out the window.
He's 9th. So I demand Memphis, and I say this with love as someone that has been a part of the Memphis community in some way, shape, or form for over a decade now. I demand that you go to NBA.com right now. Damichael's going to talk to you about how it works on Friday. Go and vote because Ja Morant should not be getting double lapped by anybody. You have a legitimate superstar in your city. Go vote for the dude.
Yeah, go vote for him. I mean, Friday is one of the few times we mentioned that, right? There are only a few times where they have the triple voting, where the votes count 3 times each vote. Friday is one of those days. I believe you have 3 more opportunities remaining after this to capitalize on that. So we will keep you updated on when those days get here on Locked On Grizzlies. But, it's a puzzling one because I feel like when you look at the bigger numbers, right, we talked about last season with Ja Morant. What stood out to me is his Steven Adams full court pass to Ja when he was fading out of bounds and made the buzzer beater. That was the highest viewed. That video had more interaction than any other sports basketball post on the NBA's site. More than any Steph Curry and LeBron James post. That post had more interaction. We looked at jerseys. We looked at, Ja being in the top 10 of all these things. So, I think there's a bigger thing here, Joe, because we're looking, basically what I look at is a lot of the fan bases in their markets are going to vote for their guys. So maybe this isn't on Grizzlies Nation. Maybe this is just, I don't know. Is it Ja's likability? Maybe we talk about how the Grizzlies, talk a lot of trash. Maybe is it enough Western Conference teams that they're finally, with Ja saying he's fine in the West, maybe all the people who are fans of Western Conference teams took offense to that. I'm trying to understand why Ja is, where he is in the vote, which 1.4 million votes is still really good. At the end of the day, he is 3rd among Western Conference guards. But 1.4 million votes would put him 5th among Eastern Conference guards. Jaylen Brown, James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, Kyrie Irving. We want to talk about likability. Kyrie Irving leads the Eastern Conference guards. So that says something. Kevin Durant, Giannis, Jason Tatum, Joel Embiid all have more votes than Ja Morant as well. So it's not just big market guys. There's a lot of big market guys, but there are also a few guys, Jokic, Giannis, Donovan Mitchell's playing in Cleveland. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what to point it to. Maybe it's just the fact that he's competing against Luka and Steph Curry, and those guys are just so good. And Joe, I'm starting to feel like this is just reality now. Ja Morant probably won't be starting in the All-Star game this season.
I think it's probable that a major reason for what you just said is exactly true, that we love Ja Morant in Memphis. I'm not sure he's making a bunch of friends outside of the city of Memphis. Now, there's still places, and you'll go on your road trip here soon, and you can report back to us. Yeah. MVP.
Oh, it happens a lot. It happens a lot.
But to your point, we're okay in the West. The fact that the Warriors are kind of the blood feud of the Grizzlies now, and obviously the Warriors fans vote a ton, given all the activity they have on that ballot. So I think
they're not putting Ja Morant on their ballot.
Yeah, no, they're not. So I think you might be onto something there, Damichael. That's a fair point. But anyway, go out and vote for Ja Morant. He deserves it. Vote for everybody that's a Grizzly. Again, this is the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. I'm done being unbiased. Go vote for some Grizzlies. Come on, get it done. This is Locked On Grizzlies, and we appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, go check out Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the association with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Damichael, the next time we're going to be together, it's going to be my favorite game of the NBA season. I say this genuinely. Obviously, Memphis played on Christmas this year. That was really cool. But I'm a social studies teacher by trade. I'm a history teacher. I'm a big fan of history. And we celebrate one of the greatest Americans that has ever lived. And in my opinion, that is a factual statement in terms of the impact he helped make on our country in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on Monday. And Memphis does a fantastic job covering and making this not just a game, but a really special day and event. I'm looking forward to previewing that with you and talking about all the different activities and all the things Memphis is doing on our episode for Monday.
Yeah, it's a special time to be associated, with anything Grizzlies, because, this is the Christmas game around here, so to speak. This the MLK Day game is tradition, and we know the history here, right? We know the Civil Rights, museum and the Lorraine Motel and all the historical landmarks. I got a chance to meet a few people who are part of the Memphis 13, with the integrated elementary schools, and where the Grizzlies actually went to one of the 4 integrated elementary schools, Springdale Elementary, kind of like in the North Memphis area out there. Some Grizzlies players, the staff, they all went out there on yesterday, donated some backpacks and all those things and helped, they painted and all those great community service, but they wore the MLK Day shirts. A lot of players just talked about the meaningful impact. And you're right, Joe. I think what I've come to learn now as a reporter, because I was talking to Xavier Tillman, right? And it's funny because growing up in the South, growing up in Memphis in particular, Martin Luther King is drilled into our heads. I've seen every Martin Luther King documentary from every angle, in every classroom, in every grade, every year. But talking to X, I forget exactly where Xavier Tillman is from, but he went to school in Michigan, right? He went to Michigan State. So talking to X, he kind of told me, hey, it wasn't until, I became an adult and I got around the Grizzlies that he really just got a real grasp. He joked around how oh yeah, I knew as a kid on MLK Day we'd get out of school, but he didn't have the whole historical background of what, MLK did, in terms of, integration and his messages and, the speeches that he made and things like that. So all things considered, it's a great learning tool. It's a great service tool. And it's just a great time. It's not just about the basketball game. I mean, the symposium is great, right? You got Gary Payton, Cheryl Miller. So many more people will be in Memphis over the course of this weekend, historically speaking, right? Do we remember what Bill Russell, being in Memphis for one of the first MLK days? I think it was in 2004 or so, back in that time. And, it's just the history behind it. It's so meaningful in this city.
They've done a remarkable job, the Grizzlies organization has, and they deserve complete and total credit. Obviously, going back, a couple decades now, as you just alluded to, you put it perfectly. It's Memphis's Christmas Day game. Memphis played on Christmas. That was really cool. This has been the most important game in the regular season ever since I've covered the Grizzlies, and I always look forward to it every January, and I look forward to previewing all of that stuff with you on our next episode. For my wonderful co-host, Damichael Cole, I am Joe Mullinax. Make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing, liking, commenting, anywhere you get podcasts, over on YouTube. Make us a part of your Grizzlies experience each and every day. We promise you won't regret it. We're continuing to make the show bigger and better, and hopefully you'll join us for the ride. Until next time, stay locked in, Grizzlies fans, and have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you on Monday. This is Locked On Grizzlies.